Okay, right, we're all set. So welcome everybody to this lunchtime seminar, which is part of the Migration Research Group at the University of Sheffield. I'm Lucy Mablin. I co-lead the group with Patricia Nabucco Marcheselli and Aneta Pikut. And we're really happy because we can be joined also by people from outside of Sheffield by this online talk. So today we're welcoming Dr. Seb Rumsby, who is a Leverhulme Early Career Fellow at the University of Birmingham. He's an interdisciplinary scholar and his work focuses on everyday politics, labour exploitation, undocumented migration, ethno-religious politics, grassroots development and non-national histories in Southeast Asia. So he's got a really wide range of interests. But today he's going to be presenting a paper on something very specific, which is the everyday political economy of recent Vietnamese migrant labour to the UK. So Seb's going to speak for maybe 30 minutes, and we're just going to be recording his talk because we're going to put it on our YouTube channel so more people can benefit from hearing about his research. But we'll turn it off for the Q&A part of the session, so you don't need to worry about being recorded in your questions. Okay, so welcome, Seb, and please do begin.
Thanks. Can I just check that you can see me changing the slides there?
Yes, it's all working properly, yeah.
Okay, perfect. Well, thanks for hosting, and it's a pleasure to communicate with you. So this is based on my ongoing fieldwork, which I was meeting up with a research participant this morning to phone the Home Office and Migrant Health and coming across all this red tape and bureaucracy and stuff. So I'm kind of right in the midst of it at the moment. But I'm looking at, I'm going to kind of bring you some kind of preliminary findings from one aspect of my research, which is looking at the kind of Vietnamese labor migration industry and basically, how people make a living here in the UK. Probably for some of you, the Association of Vietnamese Recent Migrants and Nail Salons will already be kind of familiar. And there's kind of a very good reason for that kind of association. I think my estimate is around 3/4 of my research participants, recent Vietnamese migrants to the UK, work in nail salons. And so it is kind of the focus of my research at the moment. Now, there's kind of, along with those associations, come some very kind of negative associations. If we think back to 5 years ago with the Essex 39 tragedy, when 39 Vietnamese nationals were found dead in the back of this lorry in Essex, being kind of trying to cross from Europe into the UK. And at the time, there was a whole load of talk about human trafficking and modern slavery. And then soon after that, there was, these articles coming out about modern slavery in nail salons and how, they could be sat right in front of you. I don't want to get into the kind of whole critique about the modern slavery discourse more generally, but in this context, there's definitely some kind of shortcomings by talking about modern slavery in this context. And one kind of point that is kind of, I'm going to raise straight away, is the kind of the dynamics of who is in debt to who, because at the time of these the Essex 39 tragedy, there was talking about these evil smugglers who are forcing people into lorries, and when people arrived here, they have to pay off their debts and this sort of thing. Then after that, we started getting kind of more careful, nuanced reports going back to Vietnam and finding out that people were indebted, but they weren't indebted to the smugglers who just charged a service, they got their money, and then they provide a service. And when Vietnamese people arrived in Europe, the debts that they were owed were to people and banks and moneylenders back in Vietnam. So there wasn't a kind of direct link between, and there isn't in the majority of situations that I'm researching, any kind of link between the kind of employer and or any debt bondage between the employer and the employee. Instead, money owed back to Vietnam kind of encourages a kind of self-exploitation where people are desperate to find any work and start paying off debts as soon as possible. So that's kind of one association. The other bit of news that you might be aware of is since the start of 2024, the number of Vietnamese nationals crossing in small boats has kind of rocketed. At one point, it was the number one nationality, more than people from Iraq or Afghanistan or Syria. And there's been kind of various attempts from the Home Office to try and do something about this, including kind of increasing raids on nail salons again, where a lot of Vietnamese people work. And this kind of phenomenon, I think, can be kind of helpfully conceptualized by De Genova's work on illegality, whereby people working in precarious, irregular work, especially migrants without the leave to remain or residential status, kind of get forced into greater vulnerability to exploitation because of their precarious legal situation. They don't all get deported, and perhaps the point isn't necessarily to deport them all, but to make them deportable, in De Genova's words, and more likely to accept low pay and bad working conditions. So along with De Genova's work on illegality, I find Susan Hall's work on the migrants paradox very relevant here, talking about the contradiction between the political commitment to national authenticity on the one hand, and the economic demand for resources and labor from elsewhere, i.e. cheap immigrant labor, which I think we can see a lot in the UK. And she talks about these edge economies where the accumulation of capital produces the disaccumulation of people, different if continuous practices of exploitation that are now predicated on extracting labor value through ever smaller fragments of time and space. When you think about the UK context, I'm thinking of like the death of the English high street here, where we've had 50,000 more shops closing in the past 10 years than opening. The progressive concentration of trade into giant corporations like Tesco and Amazon, even more so, which many people rightly are worried about as the kind of loss of the social glue that holds neighborhoods together. And yet within these, so if you come to, I actually live in Coventry next to Birmingham, and like many cities across the UK, but not Sheffield. Sheffield are doing all right, but many other cities in the Midlands and North, you'll see the whole town centres full of closed shops and shut up shops. One of the few industries to thrive in this period is cosmetics, hair and beauty services, as you can see on this right-hand slide. And nail salons are actually contributing significantly to that increase. And so we've got these kind of edge economies popping up in the ruins of the British high street. And so, this is not just a question about migration, but this is also a question about economics, social, what we want in our kind of urban planning, all of these questions my research speaks to. And I have this kind of everyday political economy perspective, which I won't go into too much details, but trying to connect the everyday mundane kind of realities, challenges and micro dramas of people I speak to with the bigger picture of especially kind of market forces and international global economic trends, as well as state policies. So you can look into that if you want to. So my research is based over the last year or so. I've been doing kind of patchwork ethnography in a local nail salon, observing everyday life and work dynamics, as well as interviewing various research participants from other nail salons, including a few owners of nail salons. In addition to this, I've been attending any kind of community events that I'm invited to, as well as doing some kind of Facebook online ethnography to find out what people are talking about in these chat groups, where there are tens of thousands of people looking for work, advertising for work, advertising for housing in the UK, warning about new government policies, arguing about various kind of scams and injustices that they're facing. And it's really a very rich source of data. So the first thing I want to mention is just really highlighting the kind of quite phenomenal growth of Vietnamese nail salons over the past 10, 20 years. The one Eckstein and Nguyen described this as the kind of McDonald'sization of the cosmetics industry. So instead of when maybe 20 years ago, and probably still to this day, there are some like this, going to get your nails done was a very kind of luxury service where you're pampered, you have very good customer service, and you're expecting a kind of high-end product for a very high price, and it will take a good hour to do your nails or more. Then the Vietnamese business model is quite different. It's very stripped back to just a few kind of options, usually basic manicures and pedicures. They're done a lot quicker. The kind of customer service is almost non-existent, but the price is kind of half of what it used to be. So instead of paying, say, £100 for a full set, which means your nails and your toenails, then you might only be paying £50 or £60 for this. And in fact, this is kind of created a new demand for what they've kind of made a niche in the market for a kind of low-end nail industry, which has proved very popular, and a lot of people are getting it, especially in these kind of cost of living hardship times. People would rather get a cheap basic manicure. So as a result, the kind of nail industry, the Vietnamese nail industry has really taken off. There's several salons in every city across the UK. I think at least 50 or 100 in Birmingham, and even in very small towns, you get nail salons from all the way from the top of Inverness down to South England. So it's quite remarkable, really. As well as a kind of cheap basic business model, it also relies on cheap labor, and this is provided by and fuels recent Vietnamese irregular migration to the UK. There is, it's quite amazing to see the entrepreneurialism of people who start their own businesses out of nothing, there, in a sense, we might have kind of now reached saturation point where there is enough or too many salons on the market, and a lot of bosses now complain that there's too much competition, that they're not getting anywhere near as many customers as before. Doesn't mean that they all have to close up, but in general, then they have to kind of lay off some workers, or maybe it's only going to be the husband and wife who work at the shop for most of the year, and then in busy periods they'll hire a few extra workers. And this kind of takes place in the grey economy. So people who don't have the right to work may work as apprentices. There's different ways of kind of playing this system. And we can talk about that more in question and answers maybe when we're not being recorded. So what happens when we especially kind of since the Ukraine war and the economic downturn, we've got kind of like a reduction in customers, and still more and more shops opening up. So this leads to competition, and I want to ask, how do people respond to this? The most common response is to really just kind of what they call compete on price, and not raise your prices, offer reductions, kind of squeeze profit margins as tight as possible, so that your customers don't go to the next shop along, which is cheaper. So one of my interviewees said that he hadn't risen his prices in 5 years, and you think how much inflation has gone up, not to mention cost of bills and everything in that time. It's quite shocking. Then things can kind of get a bit nasty as you get this kind of infighting between different nail salons. So stealing customers is one thing that is universally despised, but it happens enough for people to regularly complain about it. So in this kind of meme, on the first top image, we've got the nice man is the True Nails, the nail shop owner, and the cat is the worker who doesn't yet know anything. In the second picture, the worker has grown into a lion and gobbled up the nail salon owner. And one kind of interpretation of this is when the worker has saved up enough and wants to open their own shop, then they might well just open another shop on the other side of the road or the next street along, and then call up all of the customers from the previous shop and say, oh, we're opening a new shop, 50% off for the first month. So this kind of behavior is seen as very damaging, and a lot of people kind of complain about it, but at the end of the day, there's not necessarily too much they can do about it. So one way that you can kind of try and call this out is through naming and shaming online. And so a year ago, we had this message posted on one of these huge Facebook groups saying, SOS, the nail salon opposite has collapsed the price to do a manicure and pedicure for £30. You know, that's way too low. And also very important to say, December is like peak season. It's where you get the most customers. That's where a lot of salons make, you know, more profit in December than the rest of the year combined. So reducing the price like this is not cool. And if you're reading this, what am I supposed to do? Do you want to leave me bankrupt? The italics is some of the comments that are replied, some of the hundreds of comments that were replied. You know, whatever you do, don't lower your price. Or someone else is suggesting, well, make it £15 then. If you're going to die, bring them down with you. Then we have veiled threats, you know, maybe buy 5 litres of petrol and 2 lighters for them. But then soon there was this suggestion to put the original post was anonymized, but the users, the commenters started telling the poster to put the name of the shop up, and we'll all go onto Google Star and give them 1-star review, and we'll sync it. Then there will just be a ghost selling the shop. Remarkably, this kind of naming and shaming worked. So 2 days later, the ad for this kind of discount was taken down, and the author of the post thinks that the shop owner read it and has kind of retracted their offer. And I think that probably is a very likely explanation of what happened. This kind of led on to further debates about what standards are acceptable in within the Vietnamese nail community. Collapsing, there was a difference made between discounts and collapsing the prices. But then other people were talking about, is this some kind of essentialized Vietnamese problem? That's what the Vietnamese are like. They will never hold their heads up high. I think the most kind of profound comment is the one at the bottom. In a land of freedom, or we could say free market economy, who can stop people? If you like, you just do it. This kind of continued in other Facebook posts. Someone else said, could we organize everyone in an area to meet, unify, and have a minimum price list for the shop, and finding a way of ensuring everyone's committed to it? People really liked this idea, but the practicalities were very difficult. And people wanted to learn from the Chinese, who, previous generation of migrant workers and business owners had something more substantive to ensure that everyone committed to not undercutting. So these conversations kind of ongoing, but again, in the bottom comment we have a kind of attempt to explain it through what the Vietnamese people are really like. Credibility cannot be guaranteed. In China, the word trust is primary. In Vietnam, the word money is primary. Then someone piped up on this conversation and said, actually, we did try it in this area. All the shops agreed on a price list with the names of the shops on the printed sheet and hung the price list outside of each shop. For a while, it was reported that it was an organization that had a monopoly on prices, affecting customers and markets. And we got a letter from the trading standards sent to each shop asking to remove the general price list. So it turns out that anti-competitive activity is a crime in the UK. And the Gangmasters Association, apparently they have got nothing better to do than kind of chase down these small business owners and compel them to remove price fixing and so on. Maybe these trading standards are useful for big business if they were ever applied to it, but for very kind of marginalized and precarious businesses, it doesn't really seem appropriate. Other attempts to kind of try and display solidarity include a kind of there was a kind of National Nail Technicians Price Rise Day that was organized from a kind of business association from not within the Vietnamese nail community. It was there are some Vietnamese nail shops who are part of this association, but it was wider than this, and they tried to promote on the 6th of April that everyone would raise their prices at the same time in an attempt to kind of reflect the increasing costs of bills and living costs. When the day arrived, I went around several shops in Coventry and asked people about it, and some people hadn't heard of it, others had, but said, oh, we can't, we don't dare, we can't risk going up and losing our customers. And so unfortunately, well, at least in the area that I am based, this wasn't an effective way of increasing the price. And all of this kind of must be taken within the context of the hostile environment, whereby informal work has been increasingly targeted as kind of linked with illegal migration, and has been restricted, and policies have been trying to punish people for working under the radar. And this atmosphere affects both workers and business owners, who are at risk of getting fined tens of thousands of pounds if they are, found to be allowing people to work who don't have the right to work. This the kind of general effect of this is to make the wider Vietnamese nail industry more vulnerable, in a more precarious position. So, for example, many shop owners I've spoken to have been robbed. People have broken in and taken the money, and often the owners won't report it to the police because they're worried that if they report it, then they might end up being kind of targeted by the Home Office, and it might be more hassle than it's worth. So this kind of perpetuates the vulnerability that these businesses operate under. There are also kind of further ways that the hostile environment can create divisions within the Vietnamese community, as those with paperwork and regularized status are kind of pitted against those without the status. And then you start getting people who have got paperwork and residency already starting to discriminate against and get angry with or sick of people who are doing the same journeys they did to get here, because there's a kind of kicking off the ladder effect where we don't want any more because the new workers are giving us a bad reputation, or this kind of thing. So in conclusion, just to say, this isn't a conclusion because it's all preliminary, but the case of the Vietnamese nail salon industry, I think, is marked by a kind of weak community cohesion, in which there's a sense of solidarity, what Kellers et al. Describe as a stretched solidarity, where the kind of dynamics of friendship, kinship, and support in a foreign land are stretched by both hostile immigration policies, the threats of fines, and so on, but also very much undermined by the market competition that Vietnamese businesses find themselves into, because the Vietnamese recent migrant community are so concentrated into this industry that they can't avoid the inherently antagonistic competition of the market, and the hostile environment has kind of increased the vulnerability they face, and this all kind of fits in my opinion, quite kind of nicely with what de Genova said 20 years ago, that once we recognize that undocumented migrations are constituted in order not to physically exclude them, but instead to socially include them under imposed conditions of enforced and protracted vulnerability, it's not difficult to fathom how migrants' endurance of many years of illegality can serve as a disciplinary apprenticeship in the subordination of their labor. But within that, there's still plenty of room for agency, tactics, people making the best of their situation, even if it means throwing someone else under the bus. I think I'll leave it there for now. So thanks for listening.
Okay, fantastic. Just going to stop the recording.